So today's topic is how to keep your sales continuously rising without stopping. Now, everyone, what's important here is this. We all imagine and want to become imperial masters, right? I'm the same way. I also want to become an imperial master, but the important thing is, if you want to bear the weight of that crown, you need to have a lot of inner strength and experience. That's why we must become imperial masters, by solving problems and growing through those experiences. And you must achieve it. It's not just about thinking it'll work out somehow. As you solve those problems and build teamwork, you'll find yourself in that position. And now I even say that the atomy business is essential. There's a reason for that. Think about it carefully. Everyone here is living diligently, right? I'm the same way. But even though I'm working hard, why does it feel like I'm getting poorer and poorer? I'm sure many of you have felt that way. Of course, there are people who don't work hard, but usually everyone tries to live diligently. But now you need to study money. You need to open your eyes to how money works. That's the only way you can reach imperial master in atomy as well. What does that mean? It means you need to understand the concept of money precisely. Only then will your reasons for having to do atomy and for succeeding in it become even clearer. So today, I'm going to talk about what is arguably the most important thing, studying money and economic knowledge, which in Korea, we haven't really been taught proper financial education. We haven't received that kind of education. So we've just lived our lives working hard. But since we didn't study money, why am I getting poorer and poorer? And that's where it just ends for most people. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. Let me share some knowledge about studying money with you. Although my knowledge may be shallow, I am actually putting it into practice. And as I observe the trends of the times, I share what I know with you. I'm telling you these things based on my own experiences. Let's say I've worked really hard. I keep getting poorer. I don't have a house. My debt just keeps increasing. And while it's true that recklessly taking out loans is a problem, the real reason most people become poor, even when living an ordinary life, is this. It's not our fault. It's the government's fault. The government's fault. So what I mean is, there are many reasons people become poor, but the main issue is that the US government is printing too much money. What happens when the US government keeps releasing money? Prices skyrocket. These days, everyone knows this. When prices go up, life gets really tough. Printing more money isn't actually a good thing. People know this, but then why does the government keep trying to print more money? If you understand the reason, you'll realize, wow, this is going to keep happening in the future. And that will explain why we need to focus even more on atomy. Right now, with atomy, you have to be passionate, right? To really go all in, you need a clear and definite reason. When that's clear, you'll be able to say, no matter what others say, I'm going to make it. For me, because this is so clear, that's why I can say, I'm going to make it. And that's why I'm doing this. There are several reasons why the government prints more money. But the main one is that when they do, it allows them to reduce debt. In other words, they can decrease their liabilities. Simply put, what happens when money is released and the interest rate is 5%? Imagine if it dropped to 2%. What would happen then? The interest rate becomes cheaper, right? So what happens to the debt? It means you can reduce it. That's why they keep releasing more money. But then what happens to prices? They shoot up, right? So this is the problem. Inflation. Prices start to rise. Let's say I had a debt of 100 million won, but then prices double. What happens then? In reality, the burden of my debt is only about 50 million won in terms of value. So it has decreased. The burden is less, but because prices have soared so much, put simply, if I used to be able to buy 2 hamburgers at a fast food place for $1, now I can only buy 1 with that same dollar. But why is it that these days, young people, well, people in their 60s and 70s say, why can't young people stick with anything for long? Why do they keep changing, not working hard, and not even considering manual labor? Even if you all acknowledge this, it's actually a global phenomenon. Why is it that as the US keeps printing money, the whole world is being affected? Now, look here. It's because we've all experienced COVID. If you haven't experienced it, you wouldn't know. But think about it carefully, everyone. Let me tell you what happened during COVID. In the United States, the US released more money than ever before in its history. When I say they released money, I mean they just printed a ton of it and put it out into circulation. So there was a lot more money around. So what happened as a result? I actually looked into this in more detail today to prepare for this lecture. So I asked ChatGPT, and between 2020 and 2021, about $6 trillion. That's the amount they released. Honestly, I was really shocked too. But to put it in perspective, that's more than 25% of the US GDP. So if you hear 25%, it's kind of hard to grasp what that means, right? For example, on the news, we hear things like this year's GDP growth rate is 2%, right? 2% is already considered a really low number. But if it's a 25% increase, that's more than during any period in US history, even the Great Depression, the financial crisis, and wartime combined. They injected even more money than all those times put together. That's why we're not just sitting back and doing nothing. So you need to accept that. Then, is this our fault? It's not. So we need to feel an even greater sense of urgency to find a solution quickly. If what I'm doing is just simple labor, then there's no way I can keep up with rising prices, right? Prices just keep going up, don't they? So what should I do? You need to be able to make that judgment. Is what I'm doing right now really something I should keep doing? But when young people look at this, they see there's no answer. It just keeps going up. But what about it? The same in Korea. Back then, when the US started printing money, what happened? Korea printed money too. So from 2020 to 2022, over 600 trillion won was injected into the economy. That's about 30% of the GDP. So these days, people keep saying that Seoul's housing prices keep going up while prices in the outskirts are dropping. Why is that? It's the price of apartments in Seoul. In the 2 years right after COVID, they rose by an average of 40 to 50%. So I think these kinds of phenomena, now living is, the demand is just getting more concentrated. Why? Because apartment prices in Seoul keep rising while elsewhere they're falling. The wealth gap is getting even worse. Which country was the closest example of this? In Japan, the graph is rising sharply right now, but elsewhere, housing prices have dropped after reaching their peak. So I realized that these kinds of phenomena are inevitable. That's why people keep talking about owning one really solid property, one really good apartment. But this isn't just in Korea. It's happening all over the world. So what happens as a result? People want it even more. And so the government steps in with more regulations to stop them. But those who already own property just buy even more. So what happens then? I end up getting poorer. This is what happens. So from my own experience back during the COVID-19 period, housing prices, since I live in Seoul, but when I got married and lived in Seoul, I was renting a place with a John's lease. Back then, I didn't really feel like, do I really need to buy a house? Since I didn't have that kind of thought, I just lived in a John's rental. The price difference between buying and renting was only about 100 million won. But looking back now, I should have bought it, right? The prices skyrocketed. The price of houses in Seoul, I mean. So now when I go back to that area, it's right in Dongdaemun. That was my first newlywed home. They completely tore it down and built an apartment complex there, creating new jobs. So a ton of people started moving in there. So I said, hey, what happens if you eat that? You get a stomachache, a real stomachache. So where did I go next? I needed to buy something too. But because I also have this fear from seeing my mom go bankrupt from debt, I was determined never to take on any debt. So I somehow convinced my husband not to take out any loans. And while my husband didn't want to buy an apartment at all, I insisted, no, we have to have at least one place. That's how I ended up buying an apartment in Yeongjongdo, Incheon. But everyone, as a result, what I'm sharing is my own experience because I actually live in Seoul, right? Everyone wants to live in Seoul, but I'm telling you the real pros and cons. That way, you won't just rely on news articles, which could be misleading or even scams. There could be a bubble. When I first got married, you could buy a house in Seoul for about 400 million won on average. But now that's no longer possible. But do you know what's really important, everyone? I bought a place in Incheon and I'm renting it out on a monthly basis. It's been 4 years now. But do you know how much the rent has gone up in the new apartment I'm living in now in Seoul? In just 4 years, the monthly rent has increased by 600,000 won. That's a huge jump, isn't it? But the place I bought in Incheon at the same time only went up by 50,000 won. Everyone, I'm telling you this as it is in real life. Why? You have to stay alert because I've actually experienced this myself. I invested and went through it personally. But let me tell you, you should never invest when there's a frenzy. Back then, when prices were soaring, my dad told me not to do it, but I was blinded by something. When you're caught up in it, you just can't see straight. So I went ahead and bought it, but not long after, maybe a month or two. After a month or two, the price dropped to half of what I paid. With real estate, you rarely see prices get cut in half, right? But I actually went through that. What I kept telling myself to feel better was, it's okay, we don't have any debt, we just bought it outright, so we can just leave it as is. It's okay, it's okay. But inside it hurts so much. Why? Whenever I see that house in Dongdaemun, Seoul, I keep thinking, if only I had bought that back then. So what happens then? I get really upset. But fortunately, as I gained more experience, I started thinking, no, there will be another chance. And as time went by, the reason I'm telling you this is because from now on, the gap between the rich and poor is going to get even worse. Right now, the US government has been tightening its policies. So what does tightening mean? During COVID, they released a huge amount of money. So what happens then? When prices shoot up for everyone, what happens? Problems start to arise. So by raising interest rates significantly, they're basically draining money from the market. So what happened to the interest rates back then? At that time, they went all the way up to high interest rates. When interest rates go that high, what happens to everyone? Some say they can handle it, others say it's unbearable. So what do interest rates do? So after the money tightened up, things started getting really tough. People were losing jobs and the economy was getting worse. So the government had to keep loosening and tightening things up repeatedly. Why? Because the economy needs to run smoothly. So now going forward, they're going to loosen things up. They're gradually lowering interest rates now, right? Then money will move from high interest rates to low interest rates, from low growth to low interest rates. It might not go that deep, but thank you. In the end, that's the direction things will go. But look closely. If you look at stocks in Korea, for example, the Kospi went up to 4,000. So how are people reacting now? People around you start popping up saying they've made money, one or two at first. Even my own older sister, who's really close to me, her husband is a PhD at Hynix. But my sister didn't just buy stocks. She received them as a bonus from her husband's company. So she just held on to them. And now it's no joke how much that's grown. When I saw that, I thought, but you know, I was like that too at first. I thought, it's okay, no problem, it's fine, I can do my own investing. But it keeps happening, right? But listen carefully. When people around you, one or two at a time, start making money in finance, because when money gets loosened up, it keeps flowing into stocks or real estate, right? I believe history repeats itself, so I'm telling you this because things like this will happen again in the future. Why? Because I've experienced it myself. People try even harder to leverage themselves and buy more real estate. And if that bubble bursts, it could be a point of no return. It could end up like what happened in Japan. I still think there are opportunities to make money in the outskirts where the rise in prices continues, but I believe there isn't much time left for that. But the important thing is when one or two people start bragging, oh, I made money, they'll want to show off. If just one person brags, people might not care much. But what happens next? You keep watching, but then suddenly the person next to you starts bragging too. Then it becomes 2, 4, 8 people and so on. What do you start to think then? You think, wait, I didn't do it either. What's going on? By the time everything has gone up, you start feeling down, wondering, well, why is it just me? So what happens then? No, it's too scary, so maybe I should just invest a little bit. This is human psychology. It's the same for everyone. You will definitely end up doing the same thing. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do it at all. Because the past repeats itself, human psychology works like this. You end up putting in just a little. So what happens then? Because it's just a small amount, like a beginner's luck, you probably weren't that interested. Since you only put in an amount you can afford to lose, you end up making a lot of money, strangely enough. So then you think, you start thinking, what if I had just put in 100 million won in cash? And then, is that right? Wow, just like people around me are making money, I'm making money too. So what happens next? You start taking out loans. You go all in. You even borrow money from people around you. And then what happens? You put everything in. And then what happens? Suddenly, what had gone up starts to drop and you already had debt. But trying to live a little better, you end up with even more debt. So what happens then? I feel so wronged. All I did was work hard, but this cycle keeps repeating. So everyone, what kind of situation is happening because of this? Have you been watching the news lately? The Cambodia incident is a huge issue right now. Then people say, Cambodia is much poorer than Korea. So why are young people getting involved there? Why do they fall for it just because they say they'll pay a lot of money? Why do they go? That's what people think, right? But I was curious too. So I watched a broadcast by a professional lawyer on YouTube, and here's why they go. It's people with a lot of debt who go. Why? Because what kind of debt do they have? When they've taken on big debts, these days, so many people are into coins and stock. So wanting to make money quickly, they invested, but ended up losing big. But what happens if I try to earn it back? There's just no way to make that kind of money. So they tell you that if you go to a place like Cambodia and work for just a year or two, you can earn 7 to 10 million won a month in Korean currency. That's what they say. So what happens then? Those people, they end up thinking, all right, I'll just tough it out for a year or two, make a lot of money and pay off my debts. That's why they go. But even as they're leaving, they have this thought, something about this feels off. They get the feeling that this isn't really a legitimate company. They say there's this uneasy feeling, but why do they still go? Because there's no other way to pay off their debts quickly. So they just say, all right, thank you. They think, I'll just tough it out for a year and then leave. But what happens when they get there? Their own bank accounts are used as shell accounts. They're forced to take drugs and threatened so that they're made complicit in the same crimes. And that's how some people end up running away. They should be able to talk about it openly, but do you know why they can't? Have you seen the movie The Outlaws? You should check it out. The story is exactly the same. It's just like that. They say things like, you run your mouth carelessly, but catching you in Korea, killing you, that's nothing for me. It's no big deal. That's what they say. So they're really scared because they've actually been tortured and threatened there. So they're terrified. That's why things like this keep happening. And then they say things like this too. You just did drugs. You're a criminal too. Even if you go to another country, you're still a criminal. That's how they come at you. When I look at all of this, in the end, I think it's really no one's fault. The way the world is going, ultimately, the reason people become poor is because as more money is circulated, the wealth gap widens, there's too much information, and people are getting smarter and smarter. So people keep turning their attention quickly to finance and similar fields. But I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. It's something you absolutely have to do. But the important thing is, the problem arises when you take on debt, overextend yourself, and get greedy, trying to make money in a short period of time. So what I think is the reason I started working harder at Atomy was because, people need to have dreams and goals. If only I live well, in Atomy, the chairman always says this. He tells us to live a life of contribution in our life scenario, right? But the reason I dreamed of becoming a mentor is because if I succeed in Atomy, it's the only way for ordinary people to become wealthy. It's about confidently helping many people in the middle class to live better lives. Let's do Atomy together. That's what I can say. And I'm someone who has come up from rock bottom, going through hardships myself. So I have all that data and experience, and I've actually tried investing in real estate and have experienced losses too. That's why I'm able to talk about these things. Later on, you'll probably think, I should buy something really good, like a smart investment property. If I become an imperial master at Atomy, that won't be a problem at all. So when I become an imperial master, I want to get a nice car, a nice house. And as I go through this process of financial growth, if I can share that journey with someone and they see me as a mentor and feel grateful, then I'm thankful too. It means I can give people the courage to believe that even if their mom is poor, they can still make it without having anything. That way, I'm also living a life of contribution, right? So that's why I feel I really need to work hard at Atomy. Why? Because with Atomy, even with rising prices, you can achieve double growth through your membership network and social capital. Why? At first, it feels like building connections takes a really long time. But once you develop teamwork, the growth can be not just double, but even 4 times faster or more. You even get global partners joining in. What I'm saying is you need to believe in that. So as I look at the trends of our times and the state of the economy, I really think Atomy is essential. But when it comes to actually starting a business myself, these days, the trend is different from before. In the past, people preferred joining big companies and staying there for a long time. But now that's seen as less efficient, and smaller, more compact businesses are actually doing better. There's less risk, and communication happens directly and quickly through simple hierarchies, so things get done fast. That's because with AI, most routine tasks and simple labor can be handled by AI anyway. So these days, whereas in the past it was considered good to hire a lot of people, how has the trend changed now? Now, companies that have fewer employees but higher efficiency are seen as more valuable. But what did Atomy's general manager Bang do from the very beginning? He didn't hire a lot of staff, right? He made the most out of each person's abilities and grew the company significantly. And it's the same with Atomy. In the end, what are the business partners who are currently promoting Atomy like us actually doing? We're not being hired and paid a salary. Instead, we're out there ourselves building teams and organizations, whether they're small or large, and these teams gradually come together to form a bigger team overall. So I think in the current flow of the times, this is truly a land of opportunity. That's why I believe that being in tune with the spirit of the times is really important. That kind of luck is important, but I also feel like I was truly born with a destiny that's in tune with the time. And I'm really grateful for that. After I got to know Atomy, what happens every time everything gets connected? So am I normal? No, I'm a crazy person. Why? Because I absolutely love Atomy. What kind of thing is this, everyone? I love it so much and I like it so much, right? Then you know what happens? You can't help but succeed. Money naturally follows. But if you go chasing after money, you know what happens? It's fine when you have the energy and strength, but what happens when you get older and don't have that strength anymore? In the end, you get exhausted, all your energy just completely gives out, and you end up feeling totally hopeless. So I hope this becomes a clearer reason for why you really need to do Atomy. What I'm talking about today is really important because if you want to become an imperial master, you'll end up with a lot of partners, right? So it's crucial to understand money management and financial trends because sometimes the economy is good, but sometimes it's not. Let's say you're good at managing your money and investments and you keep supporting others. You'll be able to help a lot of people endure tough times. But if you don't know anything about finance or economic trends, then who would want to do it? If you don't know anything, people will just follow someone because of their charisma. But the truly talented people will think, are they crazy? And they won't get involved. But if you logically and in detail explain the vision and value and clearly lay out why you should do this from an economic perspective, then that's when business-minded people get interested. Why? Because right now, it's because of AI. Everyone has just encountered a new fate. No one knows what's going to happen. So what happens? Everyone is feeling extremely anxious right now. Because everything is so uncertain, even the price of gold is soaring. People are just trying to survive on their own. America isn't a police state anymore, you know? So since everyone is so anxious right now, what happens to money? Because of this anxiety, gold prices are skyrocketing, stocks keep rising, sometimes they surge, sometimes they fall, and then go up again, right? So what happens? There's always this underlying sense of anxiety. But the more anxious things get, the more you need to stay sharp, and that's when you can see opportunities for money. People who have studied money, think about this carefully. Imagine you suddenly received 1 billion won in Korean currency. What would you do with all that money? I've experienced investing myself. People who haven't studied money, 100% of the time, what do? They only invest in real estate. Why? Because they think it's safe. But in the coming era, even 1 billion won isn't considered a lot of money. Why? Because prices keep going up as more money is printed. So back in the day, I used to think that earning 10 million won a month was enough. You could live comfortably. But if you ask small business owners these days, what do they say? They say, oh, 10 million won a month isn't enough. It's not comfortable at all. That's exactly what they say. And I agree, it's not enough. If you want to live comfortably, travel, and not worry about money, it's just not enough. So how much do you need to feel comfortable? You need at least 20 million won a month to really do everything you want. So what does this all mean in the end? It means things have changed from the past. So I think, wow, I'm really grateful for this. Times are changing so quickly, and now people have become aware of simple labor. So what happens to young people? You can't become rich through simple labor. They're too smart now, so they just don't do it. But on the other hand, through Atomy, I study the body, the mind, and the intellect. But first, when you start with Atomy, you have to go through the process of studying the body. You have to build up experience. So as you nurture each person and grow your partners, you're developing leaders. That's when I realized, wow, you really can make money with Atomy. Even when I earn income from Atomy, I don't spend it carelessly. Why? Because it's so precious, because I know how hard it is to earn that money, that it's not easy. So I think it's true that money you earn without working hard for it is easily lost, and you tend to take it lightly. That's why I say, even if Atomy doesn't make you a ton of money, I still hope you'll have your children try it in the future. People want to get rich too quickly, so they keep falling into financial traps, especially young people. But when mothers do Atomy, their children end up joining as well. But if the children think their mom is struggling too much, they wonder, why should I do that? But let me tell you something clearly. If you have a clear vision, goals, and dreams, and you genuinely enjoy doing Atomy, then meeting people becomes part of your own growth. Everything becomes an experience, and it all helps you. That makes it really fun. Then your children will want to do it too. As they receive proper guidance, they get better at Atomy too. But if you try to rush your children into Atomy, doing everything for them and trying to make them earn money quickly, what do you think will happen to them? You could end up ruining them. So in the end, everything comes down to how much you truly want it.